The speakers, François Langlais, RTL TF1, Jean-Hervé said, with Philippe AGHION, the duty of doing this opening session, the urgency of a rational debate. We all face the problem of debates in economy, politics, societal, and the harshness of the debate. There have always been ideological confrontations at all times, but things have changed a bit because we don't have the basis from which there is discussion from everywhere. Hence, where does it come from? How do you explain this fragmentation of the discussion? This is the task ahead for us, and I will be with Philippe AGHION, who is the reference from the Cercle économistes, professor at the College of France, London School of Economics, and INSEAD, together with Yasmine BELKAID, Director-General of the Pasteur Institute. You all know Institut Pasteur. It's a private, non-profit private organization specialized in biological and vaccine research. Together with us, Gabriela RAMOS, economist, sociologist, diplomat. She currently one of the general sub-director of UNESCO, and she is running as Director-General of UNESCO. And finally, Daniela SCHWARZER, politologist, member of the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the Bertelsmann Foundation. I will say no more. Philippe, I give you the floor, so you can kick off the discussion. Thank you, François. Lovely to be with you and for you to animate the discussion. Well, at the end of the 80s, there was a collapse of the East Bloc, communism, and the triumph of liberal democracy. And Fukuyama, we said we reached the end of history. We thought, okay, well, communism failed, doesn't work. What works is liberal democracy, freedom of thinking, market economy, and globalization, where you can all work with your comparative advantages. It did work. China became richer and pulled out of poverty. India did so because of this, thanks to this model based on globalization. Not everybody became a liberal democrat, but anyway, we thought there was a end of the story and we would enter an era of peace and prosperity for all. But now we're moving into nationalism, rejection of multilateralism, rejection of knowledge. I was a professor in Harvard. Now Harvard is being blasted by the US administration, and we got a feeling that we're walking on our head. And we've seen the Brexit, the arrival of Brexit, Trump, the rise of nationalism. We overthrow Ricardo and Adam Smith, and we back to the old mercantilism, which is when a country wins in trade, the other one will lose. Nobody thinks that both could win. And there is we very challenge the expert, everything which is logical, everything that is confrontation between theoretical approach and empirical approach. Lord Chancellor, between the Brexit campaign, said citizens of this country, talked about the UK, are fed up with experts, with acronyms, which are supposed to explain what is best for us and who make mistakes all the time. And this rejection of rationality, we see it in my domain, economy. Hostility versus market. Market is hostile to public good, to common good, hostility against evaluation, international referencing. I saw Mrs. Le Pen on television. We did a study on the virtue of the vaccine pass. We had a vaccine pass, and it reduced mortality and increased productivity. And the very day when the report was issued, Mrs. Le Pen went on a television stage, and this report is fake. She is an expert in science. She's better than Mrs. Ceausescu. She knows the econometry. She can tell you that the report is false. So we think that immigration is bad because if immigrants win, then we lose. Of course, there is no idea that immigration could be good for everybody. Japan, which refused immigration and which is now feeling a demographic decline, whereas the US, which allowed immigration, gained from immigration. Protectionism, as I said, the idea that when a country is winning, the trading partner will lose. So robots, we think that taxing robots is a good thing because robot is just reducing jobs. It's not true. Companies which adopt robots become more productive and more competitive, and they create jobs. And this is a challenge, and this is for example, we think that if we block the rents, it's a good idea, but not necessarily, because if you lower the rents, well, in the short term it's good, but in the medium term, it will reduce the offering in rents. It reduces the price of housing, and we come to this paradox. Many couples who had children, who no longer have children, stay in the large flat where they get the control budget, where young families with children have to go to small housing units. So we're talking about simplistic reasoning. We think that we can separate the size of the cake and the sharing of the cake. Now, if you overtax people who win money and who work, and there will be less incentive to work and innovate, and it will reduce the size of the cake, there will be less to be redistributed. So, in fact, we blame economists for focusing on the protection of invisible victims while being indifferent to the visible victims. So, I don't want too lengthy, but how can we give a meaning? How can we reverse the trend? How can we get back to reality? How can we give, return to rational discussion? First, we must reason, explain, confront, compare reasoning and empirical. It's the way, not that way. We have to look. So I think this is important. But at the same time, what took place that when there was globalization, we forgot people in the globalization. We increased inequalities. There were people left on the side of the road. In the US, there was the red belt victims, the red states who did not take advantage. They were ignored. And that was the problem. The problem is how can you become more innovative and more inclusive? And I stop this. Europe is great because freedom, democracy is here. The social model is here. The environmental concerns are here. But the challenge is to be more innovative in Europe while restoring nobility to three values: democracy, environment, and social model. And some people think it's antinomic. I think we can reconcile the three of them. Thank you, Philippe, for the program and for your list of the lack of reason. Yasmine BELKAID, you are Director-General of the Institut Pasteur. Vaccines is the issue that fueled a lot of debates, irrational debates. This is where more, at a very high level, this when science was challenged. You're a scientist. You've worked in several countries, including in the US. You manage one of the most reputed, the highest reputation institute. How is it possible to counter this? What is the good technique, proper technique, to return to a scientific, rational debate? Yes, indeed. What is going on with the vaccine is a huge paradox. What happened with COVID-19 and 21, and the vaccine was a victory of research. 30 years of research, by the way, collective work, protection of mankind, and as a scientist, a great collective victory. Huge paradox, but following this collective victory, we could see an increase of resistance to the power of the vaccine in many dimensions. Vaccines saved mankind. There are very few generations who could see their children die. In many parts of the world, children still die of disease that could be removed thanks to vaccine. It remains one of the amazing force of preventing disease. What happened? Well, an article, which is the phenomenon of the attack against research, was very violent in the US, with censorship from affecting research vaccine, trying to narrative, linking vaccines with victims, destruction of scopes of research on the genetic diversity, on health, women's health, science being attacked. It was vicious. It was a very troubling problem, and something came 2 months ago, and something that reassured me. It seemed surprising, actually. This article said something quite odd. It said that it was a lack of trust in research. Lack of trust. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't lack of trust. Research, science, has become irrelevant. And that's even more serious. We became invisible. This message is a harsh message, but it's a message for hope. Because if that is the issue, more than 70% of people in the world still trust science and scientists. That's a positive message. Now, if it is an issue of communication, if it's communication of pertinent relevance, of political commitment, maybe we have tools now. And tools will be to re-involve ourselves. We see it through the Pasteur Institute, which is a private undertaking. We didn't see reduction of the trust of the public. People are still here, in terms of confidence and dialogue. Solutions, what are the solutions? Would be to get re-engaged, re-involved. Science should be a national priority. Scientists should be visible. The mission of science should be a mission to the service of society. We should put science to the service of society to deal with the main issues of tomorrow. But it should be argued for. It should be an advocacy, not just by the scientists, but you all, in businesses, in your commitment, your engagement, in your discourses, that you will play a role. Second role is, how do we communicate what the research is all about? Research is complex, based on collective intelligence. There is not one scientist with one truth. There are thousands and thousands of scientists who work together throughout the world, and which in a collective manner will give you an answer. And this is what research is all about. So it's a long process of vetting of knowledge. So we have to explain the process. Third one, we have to learn how to share research with people in a way which is clearer and which could be more emotional. Scientists then, science talk in figures, digits. We do not reach our public. We need emotion. We need to change the way we communicate. We need relays in communities. We need relays into religious organization. We have to have people who help us convey messages. What I want to say is that in a strange way, I do believe that this is a time of awakening, where we can still in Europe and in France resist. We must resist. We should not be passive. So you give us hope. If you have this, we can have it in our wake. Gabriela RAMOS, you're an economist, you're a diplomat, you're sub-director of UNESCO, a deputy director of UNESCO in charge of social science, and you are running candidate to be Director-General. So, international organizations like ours are key players of multilateralism, of globalization, multilateralism, which are often being attacked. So, whereas often, this is the most rational way to overcome challenges today. Climate change, I'm referring to climate change, tax issues, what is a minimum global tax? You worked in the OECD, you know all those issues. So why, in your opinion, why is multilateral reason is challenged in such a way today? And what could be the good leverage to try to restore this indispensable multilateralism? Thank you for your amazing invitation. And I'm sure that I can demonstrate how an international institution have an international function, as you say. The question is that international institutions sometimes are seen as something which is independent, which will function independently for our society. That's not true. International institutions are a mirror of our societies, of the policy of a country, of the commitment of a country, of the agreement that our countries will sign together. Experienced an amazing moment when we did manage the G20, the reform of international tax forms, the saving of the financial system. So why did this happen? So at the UNESCO, we agreed to have a recommendation from the Ethic on Artificial Intelligence. 194 countries agreed to say it's not a technical issue, it's a social issue. We have to respect human rights in digital world. What's the difference of type of global agreement and the scope, which brings changes in the countries and what we experience today? Well, you said it, Philippe said it, it's the very negation of data, negation of science, the lack of agreement on the most that we observe every day. If we cannot mention climate change right now, because there are new members of the social community who are important to manage this, and who do not agree because they negate the existence of climate change, well, we face a problem. If we cannot mention diversity, inclusion, inequalities, how can we move on? And if we have apply a dogmatic approach where I have all the answers when it comes to identity, because the identity policy which mark our society today, that will fall into the internal discussion. So for me, the key problem is that we cannot agree on diagnostics. So how can we manage a problem if we don't agree? What are the sources of the problem? And this is one of the most worrying topics, because I always agree with Philippe. It's not an issue of polarization of society simply because there is populist leaders. There is the source of the problem, that is the middle class population, all people who've been left on the side of the road, who have a feeling that the economic evolution was not fair. And this has to be dealt with. And I think international institutions have a role, a vital function on all institutions like OECD, UNESCO, institution of sharing of knowledge, and to try to see what are the sources of problems, shared, of course, and to try to reduce the noise we have of viewpoints and to show the solution. I'm happy to be with you here in the Rencontre des économistes because we haven't made headway in terms of economists, of a paradigm different from globalization, of neoclassicism, of these worlds we had in the financial crisis. The economic model doesn't work, did not represent reality. We have to move with a new paradigm, so which concerns not only the measurement of progress on GDP. We wonder how we're going to address climate, but we keep saying that we got success because GDP increases. We have to have a different vision. We have to, in economic vision, economic sense, integration of the environmental impact and social impact of the economic decision, and we don't always see the interest. And I think this is a key point that international organization can apply to have, as you say, a rational debate, and questions should be dealt with if we can no longer have this type of situation which is not sustainable. But I'm glad to say, and I'm proud to know that international institutions have contributed a lot. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous, Gabriela. Donc vous...
Thanks a lot, Gabriela. So you seem to be optimistic
And there are some projects in order to defend multilateralism and the many international organizations. So Daniela, you are the member of the board of this significant foundation, the Bertelsmann Foundation. So you are a political scientist. When we look at the political life of the whole continent, over the past 20 years, 15 years, there's a major fact. The rise of populists, especially the far right, not only the far right, by the way. So for you, you've been following these trends on your seismographs. You have a diagnosis that is being made by the politicians. This is in line with what Mrs. Ramos said, but the solutions that are advocated are simplistic. They are too fast, too swift. So what are the right drivers if we are interested in politics? So what are the drivers so that the electors could hear what they don't want to hear, but what they should hear? Thanks a lot for this significant question from a German viewpoint. So over the past few years, Germany has normalized itself in the sense that there are lots of populists. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we looked at France, but now we need to look at what the situation is in Germany in terms of the far right. Lots of people are lost because of globalization, but they are lost because they can't get their bearings with national policies. So the green transition, for many people, it implies lots of costs. And they can't understand that there are some consequences that we need to manage from a financial viewpoint. In terms of green transition, it's a matter of changing behaviors, lots of inequalities within our societies, even in Europe. And can tell you that the state has some resources to fund the poorest, but there's a perception whereby those who have a lot of money become increasingly richer, and some people are left aside. You have some data, and we've noticed that populists are making the most of the specific situation, and they draw some conclusions, and they instill a sense of fear. In Germany, in Eastern Germany, when I look at the polls, oh, by the way, there are too many immigrants, but people are afraid of immigrants because there are some who are fueling the fears, and the perception of reality is totally warped by those populists. So let us start with the fears. People have some fears, genuine fears. Their lives have changed, and we need to turn to people on a local basis. We need to listen to them. We need to keep abreast of them. A political party has to come up with a new stance. The right populist party, this is a far-right party in Germany, and they forged local networks in order to welcome people. The other parties, didn't follow suit in East Germany. So we need to consider the approach of political parties to the way they relate to citizens. Moreover, people want to follow up some political proposals that can't be achieved. It's a kind of illusion, so we need to discuss these positions through democratic means. In Parliament, in the public space, we need to fight, and we need to turn to social networks, because social networks enable young people to be politicized. So in the social networks, TikTok, Facebook, most of the time, you can see that far-right parties, extremist parties, have managed to extend their clout. So, in the run-up to the preparation, the rencontre d'Aix, lots of young people have been invited. They were polled, and that's the right approach. Allow me to end with that observation. We can trust young people. The right to vote is at 16 years of age for regional, local elections. We've noticed that young people are eager to vote, but they are poorly informed. So that's why political civic education should be embedded in the curricula of the schools as part of the academic programs. And young people should be provided with the right information so that they can play their roles as citizens at a younger age than in the past. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. A very optimistic observation with lots of avenues, but I'm struck by what you say, what you've said. So you've said that political elites, scientific elites, civil servants, economists are to blame. Of course, traditionally we would say there was a lack of education, but it's even more serious. There is not enough commitment from the elites to provide some meaning to correct the inequalities. Philippe, do you agree with that? What is your take on this? Yes, of course. In France, for example, we had the Communist Party. I don't want to extol the values of the Communist Party, but the Communist Party was close to the masses, to the toiling masses. When the Communist Party became marginal, no political force, with the exception of the National Front, who encroached upon the turf of the Communist Party. So the left elites have turned out to be elites, but they haven't turned to the toiling masses. In the US, Trump won because the Democratic Party decided to move away from the poor, from the toiling masses. Engels didn't talked about people who are not skilled, they have lost their jobs, they are under stress, and the Democrats didn't turn to them. So the Democrats focused on minorities, LGBT minorities, but they didn't pay attention to the fate of those people, unskilled people who were overwhelmed by globalization. The Yellow Vest movement, when the price of diesel had increased, we told people you can live in the suburbs and you have to use your cars. You don't have any public transportation, and all of a sudden the price of diesel has increased. So we don't think that there is another alternative. So bureaucrats didn't put themselves in the shoes of other people. Social mobility in France, for example, when you are the son of a worker, you cannot reach high-level positions. Bear witness what is being mentioned in the PISA results. Social mobility, protection when you've lost your job. I would say that we haven't paid attention to those phenomena. Globalization has curtailed inequalities on a global basis. In China, in India, inequalities have been curtailed. Global inequalities have been diminished, the social mobility has dropped, and nobody paid attention to this phenomenon. Maybe the Danes with the flexi-security approach that they have. Thank you. Gabriela, a few words. We'll take your questions in a few minutes' time. I do concur with my colleague, but there's another element that we haven't yet covered, the power. Who holds the power? Who can change the paradigm? So there is a low representation, and the economic solutions haven't changed. As part of the situations, there are some inequalities. You have the middle-aged class that is being impoverished. There's a lack of social mobility, of course, but we should be worried about the concentration of powers in terms of wealth distribution and income distribution. In France, you have 40% of wealth for the top 10 income earners. In the US, it is 50%. And remember what Piketty has told us. This trend will increase twofold or threefold. So the economic elites have some power. Remember the good governance academic classes. We should avoid capturing the state. We need good governance. But the economic power is embedded in the state. How do we address this huge power of influence? What is important is to launch reforms that will benefit all the people. Yasmine, when we prepared that session, it is not a linear process. Distrust of science varies according to the different era. As you pointed out, after a war, after a disaster, so trust picks up because the collective sense is important. We need to believe in things in order to nurture the collective spirit. At times, elites are more attentive, more committed, more engaged, and de facto, basically, you want to get the opposition from the different people regarding the big causes. We mentioned the example of World War II and what happened in the US. So mass production of penicillin, there was another moment that was less joyful, the atomic bomb. But I can tell you that science was really powerful at that time. And the US believed in the power of research to serve society. It was also the case in Europe and in France with the 30 glorious years. People invested in research, governments invested in research, and slowly but surely investments in research have dwindled. And before COVID, so investment in biomedical research diminished by 20 or 30%. In Europe, France is the country which invests the least. The country of Pasteur, the country of vaccines, hasn't invested a lot in science. So if the governments do not deliver strong signals, it will be difficult for us to defend ourselves. Governments should invest in what is necessary for company. Science is for everybody. Scientific discoveries are for everybody. It's an investment in research for the common good. So they haven't delivered strong messages regarding investments in science. So it was one of the contributing factors to the reluctance of vaccines. And there's a lack of commitment from governments. That is quite clear. Daniela, allow me to put to you this question. We will take your questions in a couple of minutes' time. So the populists, they emerge, they vanish into thin air. Today we are at the top of the wave. Between the two wars, there were lots of populist movements in the 19th century as well, at a time when globalization was rampant. So there are some clear cycles. You are familiar with all those issues. What are the factors? What are the drivers? And why do they emerge? And why do they disappear, those populist movements? You talked about the situation after World War II, and we've been faced with a war for the past few years, something that we need to realize. Russia has been attacking Ukraine for the past few years, so we are at war, and all the rule of law principles are being shattered. And the rules of democracy have been shattered. An authoritarian country has attacked democracy. So a war, a global war, is still possible. But if we compare today's situations with that of 100 years, there's an underlying change, a structural change. The way the public space works. There's a fundamental change with the advent of social media, social networks. Everybody can communicate in an horizontal fashion, but everybody can disseminate untrue information that is not validated. So there's a big space for creation, for putting forward proposals, a climate of violence and hatred that undermine the underpinnings of our democracy. And I'm quite worried because lots of people are committed to political life or to societal life. And these people have told us, I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to be immersed in a situation whereby I make a proposal and all of a sudden I will be threatened. I will be the victims of violence. And there are lots of people who don't want to be parliamentarians, members of parliament. We talked about the elites. I do agree with you, but it's incumbent upon each of every one of us, to broach the principles of democracies. So if we want to get an open debate with divergent viewpoints, it's like science. We have to make proposals, we need to argue, and we have to provide evidence. And if we cannot do that within our friends, our relatives, in the city, in the village where we live, we will be losing out. The cornerstones of democracies will be shattered. And why do we have a specific issue, a specific problem today? There are lots of new developments and changes on a global scale. There's a systemic change. Our economic model is being challenged. I've talked about the lack of communication. I've mentioned the security order that is being disputed. And there's something lacking, a political vision. How can we improve people's lives at a time when there's a digital transition, an environmental green transition that is required and pivotal? Allow me to launch an appeal to the young people. There are lots of ideas being nurtured in different fora. People are taking the lead with new ideas, and we need to look at those new trends together. Our elites, but also the future generations who will be building a new way of working, a new societal model. We should come up with a new model. We will be lost out with our fears, and we will be fueling the viewpoints of the extremist parties. Lots of questions I can see. Is it possible to give a mic to all those who want to speak? So a brief question, and you can introduce yourself. Jean-Pierre Darmon. I'm a lawyer. I'd like to turn to Mr. AGHION. I do share what you've said, Mr. AGHION. Nonetheless, if I listen to your conclusion, it is anxiety-driven. You haven't provided some answers to the questions and issues that you've put forward in a brilliant way. A brief question, please, says the moderator. You mentioned repeatedly the word elite, an elite. Do you know what is an elite? An elite is the selection of what is the best amongst things and people. It's a minority group of people who in a society have a great position because of social qualities. Do you think that the elites were up to the tasks? So the answer is in the question, I would say. But briefly, what can you tell us? There are lots of people who want to put some questions. I believe in Republican elitism. It's a great value. We had a system whereby everybody could get access. And then people would embrace different careers. But I think that everybody should be given some opportunities. And we don't have Republican elitism. The social ladder is being curtailed. When you come from a modest family, in all likelihood, you want to be able to get to senior positions, equality for all, and I'm in favor of social mobility. All new talent, all skilled people should be able to undertake. There's something that is bad when you have an existing elite who prevents others from climbing the social ladder. Go ahead. Good evening to all of you, or good afternoon rather. Can you introduce yourself? Gildas Larcide. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the appraisal of the situation of the past 500 years, things that we haven't seen, but things that we've inherited. A question to Mrs. Ramos, as part of your program, because you want to run for the director's position, what are the values in the program, the values that you need to bequeath to the young generations, how these values are embedded in your manifesto as you are bidding for the top position at UNESCO? There's another person who would like to speak, but let's listen to Mrs. Ramos. Thanks a lot for your question. I was not prepared, but let me share with you. If you consider my program, it is based on 3 different values. Inclusion. Of course, we have to make sure that people can get access to quality education. We invested a lot in education, but we haven't necessarily invested in quality education, access to culture. You can enjoy culture if you can afford it. That's not fair. Then you have the second I, innovation. If you look at the world, there are lots of new scientific developments, AI, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, so we need to seize the opportunities of scientific advances, and we need to support science, but impact is important. So we need to change the lives of our citizens. Impact is key. That's why we need to change. Gabriela, go ahead. Oh, I'm Christian Conan, the president of the ESCP, an association of economists. Regarding populism, aren't you afraid of getting a rational debate to somebody who is not rational? Isn't it the opportunity for this person to disseminate the ideas and to thwart a free society? Madam, raising your hand. Last question with Madam. And then Philippe will conclude. So 2 more questions, then Philippe to conclude. I'm a senior economist. I'm in charge of a Moroccan think tank. Professor AGHION, a more theoretical question, I would say. The economic theories have reached some limits. Maybe we need to innovate. What do you think of that? Yes, it is in line with what you've said, Gabriela. The economic rationale being exhausted. We'll ask Gabriela and Yasmine to answer the first question. Isn't there a risk when you listen to the populists, to demagogues, when they are invited to some debates, maybe they can extol their values and they can make their cases? Then can you be brief? Time is running out. Of course, we need to talk to them. We need to pick up the right fora, but we need to organize those debates and discussions. If a populist party has the support of 40% of the population, so we need to talk to them in a democratic fashion. In the social media, people are talking about things in an emotional way, anti-democratic parties, and they are talking about rationality, but we need to provide emotions in order to be able to confront the positions of different people. I do agree with you. Of course, we need to talk to these people, but it's not really meaningful. But people are looking for some information. I'm talking about science. People need information, and when there's a lot of noise, people will listen to some random information, and they will be supporting theories of conspiracy. So we need some places of trust, an institute, a site, local representatives, industries could be involved in companies. People trust in the leadership so that they can give them some recommendations on health to the tune of 68%. People want to get some answers, and they won't only focused on negative things, but negative things are very visible and conspicuous. We need to find local networks so that people can talk to one another, so that they can dialogue, and then they will be able to trust again information and news. Gabriela and then Philippe. So the exhaustion of economic theories. Of course, we need to come up with a new economic paradigm. It shouldn't be a top-down approach. What is important is to liaise with civil society. We need to liaise with young people, with people who are not necessarily knowledgeable, because these people can provide us with some concrete answers. And it is true that people are really ideology-oriented. We don't listen to one another. People are polarized. People think that they have all-encompassing answers. So we've talked about Descartes. I think so. I am. So what is important is to get a multidisciplinary approach, because social phenomena are complex. It's not simply about economics, it's about anthropology, it's about biology. What is important is to be familiar with your environment. What is important is to get a multidisciplinary approach in order to come up with some shared solutions, to be open-minded. This is very important. In science, we're open-minded. We want to listen to the others, and then we can advocate the right solutions. Thanks a lot. Just a comment. Of course, I mean, for each of the issues and questions, we would need lots of debates and discussions. There's a toing and froing process between theory and empiricism. When you look at the data, you've got some glasses. I've got some glasses, and wearing some glasses will enable you to get a rationale. But you have theory and empiricism, and there's a toing and froing process, and empiricism will tell you that you can blame your boss. There should be a permanent dialogue between what is conceptual and what is empirical. Copper said that any theory is worthy of the name if it can be revisited. So basically, what is important is to be submitted to the test of something that could be revisited. So we have some assumptions, but if the data prove us wrong, I think that it's good. And what is important is a dialogue. I think that societies that are successful are using a specific triangle. You have young people, businesses, companies that innovate. You create a startup. You become a baker, then you have a state that will regulate to make sure that taxes are being paid, to make sure that lessons are being given in schools, that you have infrastructures, public services. But civil society should play a key role. Without civil society, today's companies and businesses, they will collude with the state, they will capture the state, and they will become predatory states. That's why state, company, civil society, triangle, by civil society, the media, the electors, I mean, this triangle is indispensable. If you don't have one of the elements of this triangle, you will be on a collision course. And I think that this is the key to progress. Thanks a lot. This is the end of the session. I think that we can give them a big round of applause. Thanks a lot to all of you.